the first nerve that we have is the olfactory nerve. It is the first nerve and it controls the smell in the patient's body. The way to test this nerve is one nostril at a time and have the patient distinguish the smell of something. The second nerve that we have is the optic nerve. It is a sense nerve. What it does is that it controls vision and sight. The way to test this, for example, would be a Snellen chart.
Alright, go.
So read the first row.
Name. How to test.
Yes.
Did I do that right?
Yeah.
No, that was awful.
The third nerve that we have is the motor nerve. It is called the oculomotor nerve. What it does is that it controls the pupil's response. In order to test this nerve, we would shine a pen light into the patient's eyes to see the pupil get bigger and smaller in response to how bright or how dark it is. And we must test both eyes to make sure that they are equal to see if they're functioning properly. The fourth nerve is also a motor nerve. It is called the trochlear, and what this nerve does is controls downward and inward movements of the eye. To test this nerve, we would ask the patient to follow the physician's finger in various movements, and to test that inferior and medial movement, we would bring the finger inward and downward. And yes. The fifth nerve is called the trigeminal nerve. It is both a motor and a sensory nerve. What this nerve does is that it controls face sensation and facial movements. To test this nerve, we would have the patient smile, touch their face to see whether or not they could feel the dull or sharp sensation of the touch. The next nerve we have is called the abducens. It is a motor nerve. So what this nerve does is that it controls eye movement laterally. So to test this, we would have the patient follow the physician's finger as well, and we must test both eyes to see if the nerve is functioning properly. The seventh nerve that we have is the facial nerve. What this nerve does is that it is in charge of controlling facial expressions. How to test this nerve, we would have the patient smile or puff out their cheeks, for example. The eighth nerve that we have is a sensory nerve called the vestibulocochlear nerve. It controls balance and hearing. Damage to this nerve would result in deafness, stumbling, and falling. To test this nerve, we would have the patient close your eyes and try to balance. Yeah. Oh, that's really awkward, huh?
Yeah.
And to also test this nerve, we would have the patient close their eyes and we would snap in either ear and have the patient determine whether that snap came from the left ear or the right ear. Is called the glossopharyngeal. It is both a sensory and a motor nerve. What this nerve does is that it controls swallowing and the gag reflex. To test this nerve, we would have the patient say ah.
Ah.
Omni boy.
The 10th nerve that we have is called the vagus nerve. It is both a sensory and a motor nerve. So what this nerve does is that it controls the swallowing and gag reflex as well. But in this test, we would have the patient cough or swallow.
have an Adam's apple, so it doesn't show.
The 11th nerve that we have is the accessory nerve. It is a motor nerve, and what this nerve does is that it controls neck movements, and as well as partially swallowing and gag movements. To test this nerve, we would have the patient perform neck and shoulder movements. The 12th and last nerve that we have is the hypoglossal. This nerve is a motor nerve, and it controls tongue movement and speech. To have the patient be tested for this nerve would be to stick out their tongue. Damage to this nerve would result in loss of tongue movement and loss of sound.
Is that it?
Yes.
Keep going. Keep going. Keep your tongue out. Okay. Hey, Leland, your jumps suck.